Welcome, everyone. So a very warm welcome on the Merantix campus, a very warm welcome from the whole Merantix group, which actually you can see in full force here. So Merantix group has 3 pillars. One is the one you experience with the campus, our ecosystem pillar. Then we have Hasna from Merantix Momentum, our solutions provider. And finally, myself, Merantix Capital, investing in early stage AI first, AI native companies. Very warm welcome also to Max, Malte, and of course, Hasna for joining me today on this panel. We are going to talk about Agentic AI. I would argue a very hyped topic, but also apparently if you see how big the audience is today, also a very interesting one. So thanks for coming in here and joining this early morning session. So to jump in, let's start with a brief round of introductions. Give a 1 or 2 sentence intro about who you are, what you do, and then also about what Agentic AI is to you. We start with Max on my left.
Hi, everyone. First off, thanks for being here bright and early. So cool to see so many faces. I'm Max Tkacz. I'm the staff developer advocate at N8N. I started my journey there as the head of design, one of the first designers, and sort of built out the platform. And N8N is an AI workflow automation platform. What is Agentic AI to me? It's a system that can complete tasks autonomously, although before AI, there was tasks that could be completed autonomously. So I would add the sort of asterisk of that there's enough variability or complexity in that task to where we could not do that before with deterministic systems.
I think it's my turn. Also, a special thank you from me. I'm Hasna, I'm a senior AI solutions architect with Merantix Momentum. And thanks, whoever's in the back. And what we do is build custom AI solutions for clients. My role is basically I understand the client's problems and try to design an architecture for the AI solution to solve this business need. And for me, what Agentic AI is basically a really good butler that is able to perform tasks in uncertainty. So unlike traditional AI, where I give it an input and expect an output, I just expect the butler to understand the state and make decisions in uncertainty.
Yeah, hey everyone, Malte, co-founder and CTO at Deepset. We're the company behind Haystack, an open source framework, which has been around for quite some time now. Thousands of developers use it. And we also offer an enterprise platform called Deepset AI platform. We focus mainly on regulated industries and I would say everything where robustness matters, high performance matters, and sovereign deployment options. So our customers are mainly from finance, defense, pharma as well, legal. And yeah, Agentic AI, what does it mean for me? For me, Agentic AI is a system that interacts with the environment. That's important. It uses tools to iteratively solve a problem. So I think that's for me, the characteristics of that system, and that can come in very different flavors. But in contrast to, I would say, more AI workflows, RAG systems, what we had a lot in the last years, it's really about this iteration and using different tools to solve a problem versus AI workflows, rather kind of deterministic steps that you plan ahead.
So to make the final one, I'm Adrian, one of the founders of the Merantix group, but my actual day job is I'm general partner at Merantix Capital, which is our venture arm, investing in very early stage companies, starting at pre-idea to pre-seed even. We've invested in 15 companies over the last couple of years. All of them AI native, which means they are mostly going after business models that without AI wouldn't even work. And also quite a few of them building agentic solutions. We're going to talk about that a bit later. So I would like to start on probably the question for which many of you also came, like, yes, we can talk a lot about agents, but let's talk about how to actually build them. So what are the building blocks? What are the architectures you need to think about? And how do you even start? So if you want to build an agent, can you walk us through in a step-by-step approach, Max?
Yeah, so what I tell everyone when they come in very excited and want to start building an AI agent is, well, firstly, have your use case defined, and then from there, try not to build an AI agent first. In fact, try not to use AI first. So N8N's a workflow automation tool. There's a lot of automation that was possible before AI, so try to build that first. Then identify where that's breaking down and bring AI steps into it. So have an LLM call perhaps for classifying something. And then if that's not working and you do need tool use, so a good example is for research and whatnot, that's when you start bringing agentic steps. So what I advise for most people, if you're trying to build an AI agent, most likely today, what you should start off with is aiming to build an agentic workflow. Because for most tasks that you're building, and I would say task level is kind of where we're at today, role level agents, larger organizations with a lot of resources, I think, are doing those well for certain specific cases, but for specific tasks, starting off with that. And then from there, it's really about identifying like what tools you need. If you need an agentic step, as Malte said, it's about being able to interact with the world and fetch context, because it's that context or the results of those tools that are going to need the AI agent to make a decision, and that's why you would even bring agentic into it. So before we even get into building agentic, I would say it's, do you need agency and to what extent?
I guess that's a question you get a lot, Hasna, right? Being in a customer-facing role at Momentum, you get a lot of customers approaching you, being like, "Hey, I've read about this, cool agentic new world. I don't want to build that in my business. Like, can you help me?" How do you react to that?
So honestly, it depends on the client whether they're non-tech or tech. So if they're really non-tech, then they could still use the buzzwords, but we're still going to go in solution building towards what's really feasible. So depending on the use case, are we actually going to break it into an agentic workflow eventually, or as Max said, into actual non-AI? So some elements where I'm just invoking tools. But what I'm observing from clients usually is more towards the hyped words than actual managed expectations towards what we're actually building. And yeah, the most basic building blocks we go for is, for me, the most important step in trying to solve any business case is sitting down and understanding the problem. What is the goal you're trying to achieve? Then I can decide, is it going to be an agentic workflow or not, depending on how complex the tasks are. If the tasks are really complex, then we're going for agentic workflow. If they're not really that complex, we're probably not going for that, and we're still going to call it agentic.
Yeah, maybe like one metaphor that we use a lot with our customers is if you have to think about, do I need an AI workflow or an agentic system? Think of, you wanna buy a shelf. You have like a couple of options how to buy a shelf. One is you go to like a craftsman, like someone who's designing it for you by purpose, and you go there, you talk about your requirements. You say, hey, I want to have a shelf that is a bit like from the 70s. And it should fit exactly into my room and stuff like that. And the craftsman in that case can iteratively refine these requirements with you, pick different tools, do step-by-step what is needed to build your shelf. So super flexible, super powerful, quite expensive, rather slow. And you have the other option, you go to IKEA, where you get a kind of off-the-shelf thing. And how is that produced? You have a kind of full production chain, right, with highly optimized machines, step by step, really producing kind of high quality, robust outputs. And that's, I think, typically the I would say the dimensions that we want to go through with our customers. What do you need for use case? Do you want this more, say, flexible setup that can deal with a lot of different inputs from customers, for example, and go very in depth into complex steps? Or do you need more robustness, high efficiency, low cost kind of production line?
I mean, you've been you are obviously an AI native company, right? When did you start building your first agent, and what was it at Deepset?
The first agent, I think like 2 years ago, when it was like kind of starting with like first hypes, baby GPT, auto GPT, all that stuff, React. And I think we were interested by it, but I think back then it was purely like hackathons, playground. So I would say just internal stuff that our team played around with. And I would say the same was true last year. I think the hype increased a lot, but we didn't really see potential for it with any production cases, not really internally, but also not with our customers. And I think that's now slowly changing. So I think we have now, like this year, we brought the first customers into production with agents. And I think my feeling is the tipping point to it is coming. So it's not that far away anymore. And that's typically what we look for. Like, when does it really make sense for customers to build on that? And it's not a purely like a hype topic anymore. And I think the cases where it makes sense now are mostly, that we see at least, are mostly on the decision support, planning support side. So where you have a lot of complex data sources. It's not only maybe like one document set that you did in the past, but maybe you need to interact with different APIs to fetch information. And then it actually often, I think, is more powerful and actually easier to build an agent or start from there than kind of thinking about, okay, in what cases, what branches do I need to have in my application logic to really fetch the right information in each step.
That's an interesting one. Hasna, when I hear Malte talking about, decision support, assistance, I don't hear agent, because to me, in my understanding, agent is I throw something at someone and it gets the job done. And it gets back to me with the result, right? Fire and forget. That's what you do with your best team, with your best people on the teams. However, how Malte is phrasing it is there's still a lot of interaction in it, which obviously is the reality we are facing, because the fire and forget largely doesn't exist yet, at least not at high confidence interval levels or high levels of accuracy. How do you decide about the human in the loop? What is the thinking? How much is that dependent on the topic you're solving, and what actually are the thresholds that you're operating at?
It depends on the use case. So I do have one of the use cases where it was full automated in terms of tasks, but if we're talking about customer service and AI assistance, you obviously need to have a human in the loop, because you have customer satisfaction to deal with. If I'm leaving it to automation 100%, then I'm dealing with an unsatisfied customer and a possible churn here. So when we invoke a human in the loop, is usually with tasks that are really important to the business, and where automation cannot really succeed 100%, because the task in itself is underdefined. So for example, let's say we're dealing with a customer that needs to understand which product to get. So we're dealing about different steps here. So we could design an agent that answers FAQ questions, an agent that gives them certain recommendations on products and so on. But once you want to check out at some point, then I do want some information that I'm not comfortable giving to the chatbot or the assistant at some point. Here I would have a human in the loop. And in other cases is where you start sensing that the human is getting annoyed and asking questions that are repetitive. Then again, that's a threshold where you would have a human in the loop again. So it depends again on the feedback coming from the actual, after you actually design it, but also from how important it is for your business and the workflow of the entire steps.
I can lend an example as well from some of our customers. So they're automating, replying to customers in a customer service portal. And the tickets that get answered fully automated without a human checking it before it goes out, without human in the loop, happens in very sort of specific cases. So take all the tickets coming in, and the first thing you might do is filter for emotionality. If there's any kind of emotionality detected in the message, it's immediately getting routed to humans. I think that's a pretty good safe one off the bat. If someone's dropping an F-bomb or something, let's have a human handle that, right? The next one is then classifying by the type of task. I think LLMs today, even with a rather naive implementation, are going to do a pretty good job of saying, this is a billing case, this is this kind of case. And you could already identify those 2-3 buckets where you get a lot of very non-novel sort of grunt work replies. You can bucket those out. Everything it's not sure on or not sure on below, 95%, again to a human. And then that subset of tickets, you can start having the AI system, your agent, reply automatically. At that point, it's up to the organization to decide, are we giving it tools to issue those refunds, or is that human in the loop? From there, obviously, a lot of organizations make decisions based on the amount. If you have a sort of a self-service model where the total risk is making a bad decision on a €20 refund and the cost of a human doing it, as you see in that case, you're much more likely going to say, yes, that's also fully automated. But I think when we talk about fully automated for a whole use case like reply to customer, you can do it as long as you sort of segment out those risk cases. So you're dealing with lower risk cases and non-novel cases.
Actually, if I can jump in, I want to speak about a case where it was automated, but of course, like the final decision was not as important to a business where it becomes then it's like really risky. And one of the cases was defect detection. So it was an agentic workflow where we had no human in the loop. Human in the loop came way after to just give feedback about each of the tools invoked and also about the results given. But here, the final decision was not that I tell them this is a deepfake or not. It was more like I give them a sort of summary, sort of like what a lawyer presents to the judge, and then the judge makes the decision, which is the human. And in this case, it was full automation because there weren't high stakes in the entire workflow.
So we're talking guardrails. And obviously guardrails are really, really important when you think about, agentic solutions in critical environments, let's say the judge that you mentioned, right? Or also, let's say, a medical environment where being right in 80% of the cases and being wrong in 20% is still not good enough, right? And now here's an interesting thing. When you think about guardrails and deploying them, first, it's very obvious. So you think about what's important to you and what are the thresholds you want to go after. But then here comes an interesting implementation issue. The more agentic solutions you deploy, the more guardrails you apply, the less visibility you also have on all of this. So one would think, hey, let's do an agentic way in setting the guardrails and continuously monitoring this. How do you think about guardrails and managing them at Deepset?
Yeah, 100%. I think like guardrails were always a topic, right? I think what's new to it is now with more agentic systems, or I would say generally like generative AI systems, the number of guardrails you need is kind of growing because the more, variance in the output you allow, the more you need to control, right? And that's, I think, I would say still like a largely unsolved problem. So I don't think that there's like a kind of silver bullet, like how to do it. I think still like for many cases, it's basically, I think, about iterating and creating a test set from like in your development cycle, like, okay, these are really the situations I want to avoid. These are then the guardrails to circumvent it. And from there, you basically build up your kind of system and robustness. To give an example, I think we have one big German newspaper, an online publisher, and of course, they like when they went live, it was like I wouldn't call it actually agentic AI. It was more a chatbot with RAG behind the scenes. But still, for them, guardrails were very important because of brand reputation, right? So if readers interact on the website with that chatbot, you obviously don't want it to go into any hate speech or any racism or give actual wrong answers, or in their case, cite articles from competitive newspapers. So I think for all of that, I think it's important, basically to iterate, start testing a lot with end users, and build up from there really like a test set and then guardrails to circumvent these cases.
I think there's a really interesting case to be had for the relationship, or an interesting topic to discuss is the relationship between human in the loop and how that can affect guardrails. So something I see particularly in agentic workflows. So we'll have, like, take a case like SEO. An SEO expert thinks of the different roles they have when they, let's say, perform an audit. So they're doing some research, they're doing backlinks. Some of that is more agentic, some of it less. But with their version of human in the loop, in this case, even just with Airtable, they're from each step seeing that in a table that they can easily look at and assess those inputs from each step because they're a domain expert. So they can quickly see, okay, is this high quality or not? As most of you probably heard, you know, shit inputs, shit outputs, right? So if they're doing that validation at each step, let's say the last step is just synthesizing that data in a report. Let's say that's a very reliable step from their testing and whatnot, because that's not very novel. It's like, here's all the input, that's been checked now multiple times because this input was fed into this input, and each time they're tweaking it and checking it, then there's a lot less perhaps guardrail that you need to add in that last step in it going live, because you've had a human going in. And let's say if the probability of success of each step, let's say, is 90% right now, that probability is getting reset because a human, you know, it's qualitative, right? But that expert is saying, yes, this is 100% now before I let it feed into the next step.
I mean, for me, I don't like when we emphasize on guardrails so much when there are infinite space of limitations to everything we're building. And one of the use cases I really loved seeing how they applied it is within the design rather than actual architecture of like defining which limitations, hallucinations, and so on. It was the Zalando AI assistant. So they had a huge disclaimer before you use the AI assistant. That for me is perfect for a first use case before I understand all the edge cases out there to prevent them from happening. But I also understand the case that you brought up in medical cases. That's still an open question to me also, like how to design guardrails around decisions that are high stakes for situations where we're talking about healthcare or I don't know what else we can think of. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, we have customers from the defense space, so there's a lot of high stakes use cases. And interesting, it still was our first agent that we brought to production there, because it's also a domain where you have a lot of complex information where you very, very quickly run into barriers with, I would say, traditional AI workflows. And that use case, it's basically about planning or assisting the planning of air missions. So with aircrafts, before they start the mission, there's a whole team involved in planning what are the best routes, what kind of pop-up event might occur during the mission, how to then act, who is doing which decision, creating memos for the pilots, for the ground personnel, all of that. And that's a case basically where you need to compile so many different data sources from like the weather that you have right now, what is, I don't know, the system status of each aircraft, so pulling out data from these APIs, but then also a lot of documents like doctrines from, I don't know, German Army or not NATO. What are you actually legally allowed to do? And in that case, yeah, I think the key is still like human in the loop. So of course you wouldn't now automate it and say, okay, yeah, we just let the agent plan the whole thing. But the agent is still, I would say, autonomously doing a task and fulfilling like solving a problem, which is create me a memo, like a kind of preparation document for this mission. And then the human takes that as an input. And I would say that's similar. I don't know if you have an intern or even a senior member of your team. Some decisions I'm sure you're doing at the end, right? And not maybe a senior member for, I don't know, final investment decision. And I think similarly an agent can prepare a lot of decisions in a good way.
Actually, that's an interesting one, because I obviously being an AI investor for now, I think we've invested in since 2016, so it's almost 10 years. So we've been investing in AI companies, and obviously the question I get the most is, okay, so how much AI do you use in investing, right? And then I think the honest answer is, well, we use a lot in data gathering and research when it comes to understanding a market, when it comes to understanding potential other competitors that might come up, when it even when it understands, when it comes to understanding customer needs in a specific market, then you can do some flag checking on people, even what have they built in the past and stuff like that. And then also financial planning, market sizing and all that kind of stuff is something that the large language models are really, really good at. Yet when it comes to actual decision making in early stage investing, based on very little data of the actual company, right? Because the actual team might be around for 6 months, 3 months, sometimes 1 month only, then the decision comes down to 2 questions. One is, how much do you trust this team to build the billion-euro company? And 2, what's the conceptual probability of them being successful in that specific industry and market to do so within a credible amount of time? So that's the 2 essential questions that you need to ask yourself. And I would argue that is a lot of intuition still applied there. That obviously is informed by a lot of data that you've been looking at before, but in the end, it's a decision you need to make yourself. Now, I would argue that late stage investing in companies that have been around for a couple of years are significant on the commercial side. Then you've got a lot more hard data points you can actually rely this decision making on.
I'm curious, Adrian, with that in mind, when do you think we'll see AI agents making like Series A term sheets and sending those out?
Honestly, I think quite soon. Maybe not Series A. Well, it's always a question of how these rounds are named. I think it's more also of a price question. The stage. I think in the late stage, you will see investors doing quite automated approaches. I totally believe that. And I'm also sure that people are going to try it in the early stage even. There it probably becomes more sort of like a betting engine and where you just get access to a company and you place a small ticket, and then when the company develops well, you wanna follow on. So before we jump into Q&A, I think I wanted to close this round with, what is it in this whole space you're most excited about right now, and maybe also what is it out there that people need to watch because you think there is a big kind of development coming around the corner? Malte.
So I think right now something that's already out and I'm excited about is MCP. So not sure how many of you have heard it, but it was big hype a few weeks, months ago. And that's, I think, giving a good tailwind actually to agents because it's way, way easier now to equip them with tools. And we see, especially in larger enterprises now, it's not anymore all on the AI team or the team building the AI system, but actually other teams who before owned APIs, they now also give out basically MCP tools and MCP servers. So I think that whole ecosystem is growing, and that's something I would say very tangible that I'm excited about. I would say more midterm, long term. I think the biggest adoption blocker that we still have right now is, I would say, it's not on the tech side. It's way more on the product management and UX side, I would say. So I think identifying the right use case and then really thinking, okay, how do I embed my AI system there? I think that's we do a lot of shortcuts, I think, there as a community and say, oh yeah, we need a chat, like put a chat there. I think there's way more exciting opportunities to think how you embed AI in different products, in different workflows. And I think if you do that right, then typically I think the success rate is higher and you get a better ROI. So everything I think around UX of agents, human interactions, that I think is interesting.
Should I go next? I think the most exciting thing for me is not a tool or use case specifically, but how the architecture of these different agentic workflows develop. So we started prompt chaining when then aggregators came along and so on. But I love that all of the use cases that are actually close to production are a combination of all of these together, where tasks are really broken down to very specific small ones, deterministic ones. And that's where you see this, okay, like we can actually make something and this is going to next level. So it's the architecture side that makes it super interesting for me.
For me, first off, I think MCP is exciting, but just generally protocols that make all these systems interact with each other is exciting. Is it MCP or 808 or REST APIs? I think the verdict's out, but obviously that's going to be important. What I get most excited about is just the whole model landscape evolving. I remember when I started building agentic workflows, it felt like I was always needing to pick, like I want to light a candle and I have to use a flamethrower. So like I probably will light the flame, but I'll probably waste a lot of energy and I might burn the candle because it knows, 15 other languages and all the other stuff that could get it confused. So I really, I'm hopeful for there being the right model for the right job. I mean, this happens very often when I'm building, even before we get into evaluations. I'm trying with prompting. I swap the model. It's working with a very naive prompt, for example. And I hope for everyone when they're working in their domain, building their own AI agents, which is something end-to-end really about empowering people, domain experts, that task the best, that you can go automate that, is that you can go pick the right tool for the job. And something I'm really hopeful for is, I see it myself. My father is a quality manager. They make EPS beads, and they have a quality issue, and he has to take photos and sit there and count the beads that have defects and not. So he sent me about 40 photos. We're tagging them up. We're going to fine tune a small model on that. And now that's going to work to a confidence level that he can use for his use case. And it's just hitting me like, how many of us have domain knowledge? Imagine 3, 4, 5 salespeople get together, get 10 years of their cold outreach emails, fine tune an open source model today, and you're going to have a much more powerful model at answering cold emails. And that's just one specific niche job. In each region, we have specific tasks and whatnot. So I hope the ecosystem around domain experts being able to, with low friction, be serving the right model for the right job creates a really healthy ecosystem where you can pick the right model, but also where those individuals can own that IP that they've spent a long time developing as humans.
Yeah, I'll subscribe to that. Before we go into questions, I think what you're saying is exactly also what we're seeing. I think in short words, what I'm excited about is this new general purpose technology being the groundworks for just a hoist of incredible new companies that come up, built by smaller teams with less resources, showing faster growth, which is all stuff that excites me as an investor. And with that, we go into Q&A. Maybe to save some time, shall we go around with the mics?
Yes. Hi, my name is Eckhart. My question is part question, part insight. So the question goes along the lines of how do you balance determinism versus indeterminism when you build a workflow? So the horror of, or the strength of LLMs is the indeterminism, and the horror of LLMs is the indeterminism. So I spend all my day in Cursor, and so I have a background both in legal and in engineering. So the lawyer in me always wants definitions and do everything by language. The engineer in me wants everything to be deterministic, step after step after step. Now, building my system that I'm working on, I apply the engineering skills and try to lay out the path through the problem to the solution. And then I use the tools in Cursor to do that. And then in the beginning with GPT-4, which in comparison to the models today is as stupid as a bag of hammers, I had to literally lay out every single step and then ask GPT-4 to support me. And then over time, I realized I was still doing that with more capable models. And then at some point, I observed that O3, for example, came up with solutions by itself that I could have never thought of. And so I realized I'm just too stupid to actually lay out those processes still. I let the model do it. And so what I came to do is I am spending half of my time building tools for O3 to actually get the job done and let O3 come up with a solution. And so when I look in you can do a lot of deterministic things. It might be a lot of work. But at the end, you might figure out that if you had asked O3, I'm particularly excited about O3 and now the price drop because it's such a damn smart planning model, that you might actually come up with a better solution if you let the model do the work and just provide the tools. So how do you balance that?
I'll start first. It's like these are different types of brains you're dealing with, right? So you can think about it that way. It depends on the task you have in front of you and what sort of brain you think should work for that one. Is it a reasoning brain? Like GPT-4, when I want to write something, I go for GPT-4. It's really good at writing. It's not really good at like solving something, but if I want to make it pretty, I do that. And then if I'm designing all of it, and of course, if I want something, you spoke about deterministic tasks, then I'm invoking tools given all the results to this brain that writes it down. So it really goes down to, you need to step back and realize which brain do I want to use every single time you try to design a task. So this is how we do it, at least.
And if I got you right, so your use case is coding, right? Coding Copilot. Yeah, yeah.
It's the domain that
yeah.
It's building the platform, which is coding that. So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Because I think that's like, for me, that's a good example of a use case where more agentic steps make sense to me. And it's very hard to do everything in a deterministic, predefined workflow, like how you code, because you have often very different inputs, very different asks, like, okay, what do I want to achieve basically now in my next step, in like what's the next, I don't know, function I want to write, or a feature that I want to develop. I think what I observe with our teams there is actually, I would say, this, like, it depends a bit on, do you work on a greenfield project to ramp it up? That's of course something where wipe coding is like all the hype. But if you really more work on a, I would say, established system, and you do rather, say, small iterations, enhancements, I think it's like vibe coding is very dangerous, and sometimes takes you more time than afterwards to understand the code that was produced, or debug the code. What I see is that our team is adding more and more tools and guardrails and prompts and assets basically to Cursor to, I don't know, think about the style of coding. We recently added an MCP server internally for executing tests or running stuff against different APIs. And I think with that, Cursor in that case becomes way more powerful. It's not only, I don't know, a chat and you produce code, but again, you have something that interacts with an environment. You could, I don't know, even deploy it to dev or staging environment and run something there. And I think that's what, if I got you right, is what you also would describe. It's sometimes less, for these kind of problems, less about, okay, these are really the steps, the production chain that I need to define. It's more about I need to equip the tools and success criteria, and restrict the system in that way.
I think a great example here is thinking about how, because I think the question is like, when do I be very prescriptive and say you will do this, and then you will do this, and you will do this, versus say, oh, let's get O3 to come up with that?
Yes, but with the specific background that I can only speak for myself, realized that I am dumber than O3 in figuring out what the right path is. And so at some point, I determined that it might be better to actually let O3 or whatever model you use hash out the path to the solution, instead of trying to cobble together one step after another that my limited brain with my limited experience can come up with.
Yeah. So in that scenario, I would say if it's a very non-novel task on which you're a domain expert and the definition of done is very clear, like there is tasks that we as humans do today, which is and everyone's happy and it's job done and it's 99%. In that case, describe it out. If that's already known and you don't have to figure that out and it's established practice, let's say in a role domain, most likely I would go for that. But these models are getting a lot better, right? Like what's O5 going to be like, and when is that coming? So I would be generally building towards assuming that these models get better. A lot of builders that I talk with, they're like, hey, well, for our use case, it's 80% of the time working, that's not prod ready, but we're building for the models that will exist in future. So I'd say if you have a lot of clarity on that task, sort of model that out deterministically. I guess with the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The less you know, the more you don't know that you know, right? And then the more potential variability in the task, one tangible strategy I would do if I don't if I'm not a domain expert, like when I was doing that fine tuning thing with my dad, that was the first time I was doing that, is using an advanced model and sort of have a discussion on planning that out and maybe collaborate with that model to come up with what that process could be and then implement it and then go, okay, well, for step 2, we're going to use Llama 7B or something like that because it's a simple classification step and you could break it down.
How many more questions do we have? And maybe we shorten the answer time a bit. So maybe we only pick one of the,
Okay, thank you so much. We'll be fast. My name is Lex. Thank you so much for explaining everything, giving your insights. You're doing you're pushing the world, I think, to a better place, and you're risk takers. Thank you so much. So I have a quick question about AI. It's less technical than the first one, a little bit philosophical. So I want to talk about AI privilege, AI literacy. I just want to ask you a question for each of you. Let's talk about maybe now and the nearest future. Let's say you have a team of, I don't know, like of your employees, of your developers, and do you already notice the people who can use AI well and those who don't or just don't use AI at all? And you already notice the difference, how someone who uses AI is much smarter or efficient? And I mean, what's your just general opinion on future in terms of how to create the inequalities if someone has a better agent, and what is your feeling on for future? How it will be this inequality would be bigger or maybe not? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to start on this one. So I think 2 things. One is on my own team, we're a very small, so on the investment side, we're a very small team of very highly skilled people. So there, the differences are less clear. Also, when you look into research right now, the biggest gaps or the biggest delta from people using AI versus people not using AI is usually in the lower skilled groups, cohorts, and that's at least what's shown in the previous studies. So I think that's also something that then points to my second point, which is I am an advocate of saying we need software engineering, coding, machine learning as of 1st grade at school. Like we learn math, writing, reading. We also need to learn the fundamentals of code to be literate in the future. And I do that with my kids.
Thank you so much. My name is Tim, and my question is simple. How it is for everybody. What do you think are the best 3 use cases for agentic systems without human in the loop and apart from venture capital? Thank you.
I think a really good one, it's what I alluded to before, is customer service tickets with segmentation on a more self-service product. So not customer success, not dealing with your high ticket enterprise customers. In terms of, so that's support. Sales to some extent as well, depends what kind of sales you're doing. If you're doing a lot of outbound and that's a strategy that works for your organization, it sort of has a low hit rate and a low risk rate. That's another one as well. And then all manner of internal ops and stuff, like generating reports for things and these kinds of, at end we have all manner of Slack bots and agents that sort of do things on our behalf, all these kinds of internal tasks. That one, not that task type isn't similar to something you might do that's customer facing. It's just most of the time, if it doesn't have delete access or edit access, there's a lot of things that can still be useful in sort of serving that information for a human to make a decision, but there's a lot of non-deterministic perhaps thinking or context access to get to have a good result for that human to make a decision. I would say those 3 are the ones that I'm seeing from end-to-end customers today, like going to prod, so shall we say.
Rafael, do we have time for 2 more questions?
I was going to say 1, but okay.
1.
Dankeschön. I have a question more towards Adrian, I guess, so more the capital side. It's my impression that there are a lot of AI startups, they call themselves AI startups, they're basically just using like an API, for example. But like the big ones like Google, Meta, and the like Microsoft, I mean, they probably just copy paste that, integrate into the services, as we also have seen in the past. So I'm more interested, like, would you agree? Like, it must be like startups you probably invest in a certain niche, like probably serving customers or a market that is small or big enough for startup, but too small for the big ones. Would you agree?
Well, there's two things to that. Generally, yes, we do not invest in wrappers that just wrap themselves around a large model and provide access for, let's say, a specific target group. What we essentially look for is you building a solution going deep into a specific vertical, going along the value chain, and being able to also capture quite a bit of the value that you're creating, and integrating yourself into the workflows on your customer end. Because we think technology is not going to be a moat for long, but value creation for your customer and integration in their workflows definitely is. So complexity is a moat, in other words.
Do you maybe have like an example from your 15 investments?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one very complex example, actually, but also very interesting one would be Cambrium. Cambrium is building bio-based materials using protein engineering. And instead of just building the protein engineering engine and then selling that to biotech companies and pharma companies, they do the discovery themselves. So they come up with novel types of materials that they then sell, almost sort of like an ML company now turned chemical supply company. So they go along the whole value chain. And of course, the level of their model and the efficiency grows with each discovery they do. So you see a lot of compounding effects that then also is going to be a moat in itself.
Dankeschön.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to come here. So thanks for organizing this. So I'm a product designer and I recently started using Replit just to have fun. My question is that, and I was blown away because it set up a database, I can do API integrations, and it's very sophisticated. So now that product creation is commoditized, what do you think is the differentiating factor that asymmetrically differentiates, let's say, good founders from great ones?
Happy to take a quick step. Good ideas. I think Sam Altman was saying ideas guy or something, right? But I also have a UX background. I'm also blown away by the things that I can build in Cursor in my case. But I think we see it with all this AI tech that comes out. You know, a new vision model comes out and everyone does the same action figure thing on LinkedIn, right? Like all this possibility and a lot of sort of derivative work happening. And maybe we're in the exploratory phase that makes sense. You're like, oh, cool, someone did that. Let me copy that. But I think what's going to separate people is the ones that use this technology. And because these AIs, AI systems, whatever you would call it, this technology, it's not so great at coming up with something novel. Like when Steve Jobs said, oh, the world needs an iPhone, and now everyone has an iPhone, like that wasn't in a chart. That was like an idea in his brain. So I think people who have a vision for an idea, for something that maybe it's solving a problem, but maybe it's a problem we don't know we have yet. And then those people that can use the reduced friction to go build with less resources and not have to convince, let's say, a VC at that stage to get the funding, I think those individuals will be very successful. And I'm very excited for like a lot more people, especially like outside of San Francisco or outside of bubbles where they have access to capital and the right people, that they can go build. Like a kid somewhere, you know, on the other side of the world is going to be able to go build that big idea now.
Maybe in my 2 cents, I think some things got simpler, definitely with these tools, and faster. I would say from my perspective, the key capabilities haven't changed though. Like you need to iterate, or have the ability to iterate very well very quickly based on feedback that you get with customers, with market, and then you have to instruct Replit or your team or whatever. But you still, I think, have to distill all these signals that you have and then iterate on your journey. And the other part, honestly, then later, I think is a lot team building, like hire the right people, get them behind your vision. I think I don't see an agent doing that.
Yeah, just 2 cents on that. Fully agree on the leadership, and the team is actually making the difference. And I think on the business side, I think it's essentially 2 things, right? You need to create tremendous value for your customers, and you need to build a system in a way that you're not easy to be replaced.
I'll finish it with don't fall in love with the tech.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Thanks, Max, Malte, Hasna. Thanks for being with us. Now we move over to the breakfast part. And if you want to join more of these events, follow us on the campus LinkedIn page, or also the Capital LinkedIn page, or all other newsletter distribution ways we have here. Take care. Thank you.